Welcome back, Vikings. This is a tutorial on the 2D Graphics 7-layer drawing project that we have. I hope that you enjoy this project. It's all about making a 2D drawing using layers, the brush tool, and the text tool. We're going to figure out how to do that. You can recreate a food, a place, a character, maybe from a video game or a fictional character, maybe somebody you know, or an object. You can get a little extra credit if you choose to make a Viking. All right, that said, first thing you're going to do is you're going to get a reference image. So we need to find an image on the internet that we're going to use as a reference image. And a good idea of how to use this is to split your screen and to have your reference image to where you can look at it and you can work on your digital copy on the side of that image. So I'll kind of show you what that looks like. For this particular project, we are going to use a online image editing utility called Photopea, and it could be Photopea, the actual creator of this this website calls it Photopea. I think it rolls off the tongue better as Photopea, but who am I to argue? I guess you could make the same argument for the person who made the GIF, who calls it a GIF, and most people call it a GIF, but the original creator, the person who invented it, calls it a GIF. So it really just depends on what you want to call it. The creator, of course, is the person that made it. So you'd be, it would be like if somebody were named Adam, but you called him Adam all the time because you thought it sounded better. It's not really the original creator's name, but it's something to think about. All right, let's check it out. I'm gonna skip the reference image part. I'm gonna show you what it looks like when you do that. But as far as the tutorial goes, I don't want to give you only half the screen the whole time. So let me show you the process of doing that. First thing I'm gonna do, I'm gonna go to google.com. I'm gonna go to the images section, and I'm gonna search for a Viking in this case. And okay, there's some cool Vikings. I like this one right here, so I'm gonna try to recreate this one. So I'm going to take this Viking right here. I'm going to open that up. And I'm going to make this full screen. I'm going to make it half of my screen, rather. Let's check out this Viking. All right, that's pretty cool. All right, so I'm going to make this half of my screen. I'm going to split my screen by clicking on the tab here and just dragging it to the side of my screen. And then I'm going to choose what I want my other side of the screen to be. And I'm going to use Photopea, or Photopea. And so this allows me to essentially, there's a little tune that goes with this one. That's nice. Let me turn that off though. Thank you. All right, so I'm gonna draw this Viking, something like this. You can find an image that you want to recreate. My suggestion once again is that you put it on half of the screen here. That way you can go back and use it as a reference image. You can like draw something over here and then look over and be like, all right, yeah, that's kind of like what this looks like as far as the axe and the person and all that. All right, so now that I've found my reference image, let's see what the next step is. So I'm going to create a blank canvas. I'm going to set up my project. So let's take a look at what that looks like. I'm going to do this in full screen just to make it easy for you to understand what's going on. So we're going to go up here to File, and then I'm going to go to New. And once I do that, I can create a name for this project. This is a 2D 7-layer Viking. That's what I'm going to call this. There we go. And I can choose how big I want this image to be. I can put it in by pixels and height here, or I can go down here and I can choose popular things. Like if I wanted to make a mobile wallpaper for my phone or something like that, I can choose mobile right here. And then from there, I can choose any one of these, whatever matches my phone. Or I could go up here to, maybe I wanted a screen, maybe I wanted a certain, I want to make a wallpaper. That would be kind of cool to make a 1080 wallpaper or 4K wallpaper. Yeah. Or I could go and get a print, and I could do like a letter-sized piece of paper if I wanted to print this out. So this is how you can basically choose what size you want your image to be right here. I'm going to make a wallpaper, so I'm going to do a 1080 wallpaper. I have a 4K monitor, but just for the sake of doing this, I'll do a full HD. And I'm going to create it. There we go. So you can see up here, you've got all these different options. Something to keep in mind right here where it says DPI, that's dots per inch. And what that means is that there's so many dots within an inch of the frame. So right here we have 72. If you want it to be really good looking, you want to print this out, then you want to make the DPI 300. If you're doing something that's purely going to be shown on a digital surface like this, you could select Full HD, and you got that, and it should be fine. Now, alternatively, there's all these templates. So if you wanted to create something that was a template of some kind, like I just want to make like a sign or a motivational message or something, you can see that there's a bunch of them right here. And you could also type in a keyword here and look through different templates that are created within Photopea. So very interesting, very cool stuff. If you wanted to create images, it's a really easy way to do that. However, I'm going to create a blank document here, so I'm just going to go full screen, Full HD, press create, and now you can see that you have this empty document here, and you're all ready to start your drawing. All right, let's check out what the next step is. So step 3, we're going to create a background layer. And this talks about layers. So let's talk about what layers are here. So let's check out how this is laid out. This is pretty much identical to the way that Photoshop is laid out. So if you have access to Photoshop, luckily the things that we're going to learn in this using Photopea are going to be directly applicable to using Photoshop. And if you already use Photoshop, then you're going to feel right at home with this application. So let's take a look at how this works. Over on the right-hand side here, right here in the middle, we have our actual image. And we can have multiple images open, and they can be different tabs that are right here. So where it says 2D 7-layer Viking up here, and there's a little X, you can have multiple images up at the same time. It's very useful. If you look over here on the left-hand side, we have all these different tools that we could potentially use. So we're going to go through some of these tools, but for this lesson, you're going to learn how to use the Move tool, which is this top left one that we have here. We're going to learn how to use the Brush tool, which is this tool right here. That's the letter B. You can press the letter B. If you hover over the tool, you'll see that there's a little hotkey. In this case, the letter B. And if I press the letter B, you'll see it selects that tool. So we're going to talk about how to use the Brush tool. And we're also going to learn how to use the Text tool in this project as well. We're going to touch on the Dodge and Burn tool, which is this one right here, Dodge tool. And if you click and hold down the mouse button on one of these menu options, you'll see that there are more options that appear underneath that one thing. So if you go to the Brush tool and hold down the mouse, you'll see, oh, okay, there's some other tools down here. And the same thing for the Dodge and Burn tool that we're going to use here. So just something to note, you can hold down the mouse button, or you can click and hold down a menu option, and you can look at them. Alternatively, you can also press, typically in Photoshop, you can hold down Shift and press B, and it'll go to the next option. Photopea doesn't have that, so that's one of the differences. All right, so let's check out how layers work. So first things first, when I say 7-layer, what do I mean? Like a 7-layer burrito from Taco Bell or something? No, I'm talking about layers, and layers are over here on the right-hand side over here. If you look at this, you'll see that there are 3 tabs. There's layers, channels, and paths. We'll talk about these other ones later perhaps, but right now we're talking about layers. With layers, we have these menu options down here, and the best way to think about these are transparency sheets. If you were around back when teachers were in classrooms and they used the ancient technology known as a screen projector, you will have seen a screen transparency sheet, and they're basically like invisible pieces of paper that you can write on, and then a projector makes the opaque parts of the projector visible. So that's really complicated sounding. Let me show you an example using a search here. Projector slide cells. Yeah, that's what they would be. So here's a slide projector. Let's just say transparency sheets. That's what they would be technically called. So they look like this. What is a transparency sheet? Let's take a look at it. So here's what I'm talking about. There's like a transparent piece of paper here, and you write on it, and then it projects a light up here and puts that up on the screen. So you can write stuff on here, and then it will actually show up over here. And that's basically what layers are in Photoshop. So the way that this works is from the bottom of the stack, anything that's below would be like you have a stack of paper and you're putting transparency sheets on top of it. So if I draw, let me show you the brush tool. If I click on the brush tool here, let me not get ahead of myself. We're going to start with a background layer. So what we see here in the layer section is the background layer. And we can do different things with this. I can draw directly on the background if I want to, or I can make it a certain color if I want to, or I can add settings and stuff to it. So let's make a background layer. The default background layer is just a white piece of paper. You can also choose to make it transparent. What we're going to do is we're going to change the color of this. So I'm going to go over here to the gradient tool right here. I could use the paint bucket tool or the gradient tool. And if you look down here, it looks like a gradient. And a gradient basically means that it goes from a solid color to a different color or to like a really light version of itself. That's a gradient. There's different color grades that show up here. There's different grades that show up. So it could be really bright to really dark, or one color to another, or it could be totally opaque to see-through, and that's a gradient. Alternatively, if you hold down the mouse button on this, you could choose the paint bucket tool. So that's what I'm going to do. I want a paint bucket because it's simple. I understand a paint bucket that's probably just gonna make a single color. Now when I choose that, I need to actually choose a color. So to do a color, to use a color, over here on the left hand side, you're going to see underneath this magnifying glass, you're going to see this black and white box. Now in this photo manipulation software, you can choose a foreground color and a background color, or you can just think of it as two colors. This top one is the foreground color, and that's what actually gets painted. So I'm going to click on this black square, and you're going to see this pop up, color picker. This means that I can choose a color that I want to use. So the first step that you do whenever you use the color picker, this stands for any kind of color that you want to use, whether it be the brush tool or the gradient tool or whatever, is you first choose the color of the rainbow you want. You see this rainbow over here on the side? You're going to click on that, on which color you want to use out of the rainbow. So this is choosing your color. Let's say I want my background to be a blue. That's pretty cool right there. All right. Then you get to choose the shade of that color that you want. Right here, this big box that you have here, I can click on this, and if I go over here, ooh, okay, there's dark blue, or I can go up here and choose a light blue. There's all these different settings, and we're actually going to talk about how hexadecimal colors work, perhaps, and we're going to talk a little bit about how RGB values work. Basically, these computer colors are created with something called an additive color process, which means that it adds light together. Unlike ink and printing is a subtractive process, where you add, the more color you add, the darker it gets. In the case of RGB or additive processing, the more color you add, the brighter it gets. You'll notice that if I go up here, well, all the numbers of pure white are 255, maximum value. And if I go down here to 0, then that's pure black. And we have everything in between and different shades of color that you can put in here. And each color has a name, which is represented by this hexadecimal value right here. So I can go in here and find a color. There we go. Now that I found a color I want, I can press OK. And now I have that color selected right here. If I click in here with my paint bucket, you'll see that now it's going to change that color into this. Now something for you to note, we have two colors down here. So if I chose a different color from my background color, you can switch between the two if I hold down the X button, or if I just press the X key. So that switches, if you look down here, that switches the color that I'm using. So if I wanted a paint bucket in white, paint bucket in blue, this is really helpful if you want to draw with two different colors. If you want a pen where you can quickly swap between the two colors, bam, 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 go between whichever one I want. So very useful to know how to do that. Alternatively, you're going to see something that says D right here. And when you press the D key, it makes your colors back to black and white. So that's basically all it does. If I chose two different colors here for my colors, let's say I wanted a blue, and for my background color I wanted like a red, if I wanted to draw with this, or if I wanted to paint bucket with it, I could quickly switch my colors. Or I can press the D key. Let me go back to blue here. If I press my D key, then it's going to go back to black and white. Black and white are really important with masking in Photoshop and with image manipulation tools. But in this case, if it's for drawing with colors, and we'll talk about masking later. All right, so we've created our background layer. If you wanted to, you could also, instead of doing a pure black background, you could use a gradient tool. And the gradient tool can go between two different colors. Like if I chose blue, okay, that's good. And then I wanted to choose like a light blue or something like that. You can see that my color that I'm choosing up here, that's represented here, it's going to fade between my foreground color and my background color. So now, if I wanted to draw a gradient, I can click and drag how I want that gradient to be shown. So there we go. I can see I'm going from my light one to my dark one. Now, what is this whole line business? Well, if I click a very short line, you're going to see that the gradient is going to start wherever I click and I start, and it's going to end and get to the other color where I stop. So if I want a really small gradient, bam, I can see that this is like a very, very tiny little gradient here. Then there's a fade in between, we can see that. But if I want the gradient to last all the way through the entire painting here, there I can see the darkest point is over here, and then it finally gets to the background color over here. So that's how you can kind of create gradients and different effects. There's also different types of gradients, in case you're interested in making different types of gradients here for your background. If you go up here to where it says linear, you can change this to other types of gradients. For example, radial. Let's see what that looks like. Okay, radial, radius, circle stuff. Got it. Okay, radius. If I make a little circle, then it's a little gradient. If I make a bigger one, then it's a bigger circle. So this is all computer graphics and how you can create different types of backgrounds. Very cool. If I wanted to do angle instead, we can see, oh, okay, it's like a circle, but it's like a cone. Like this part is protruding up, and it goes from the darkest color, and it spins around that spot to the lightest color. Okay, I kind of see how that works. And the line that you drag basically just shows the direction that that line is going to be cut in. If we go to reflected, just play around. Okay, this gradient is like a middle part, and then the outside of the background layer, background color is on these sides, so it's sandwiched, basically. Okay, so play around with these different types up here. Your gradient there. I kind of like this. I kind of like just a linear one, so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make it like a sky. There we go. Because the picture that I'm using is kind of a sky. It looks actually the picture here looks like it's darker up here in the top left, so that's what I'm going to do in this. I'm going to go up here and make that darker. There we go. All right, so I have my background using a gradient. Very cool. Now we're ready for the next step. Let's check out what that is. The next step is creating a setting layer. So the setting is like not the subject, but maybe stuff that you wanted to do with that subject. So stuff that would be in the background, but not necessarily like the main thing. So in this case, if I look at this image, let me go back to showing this. If I look at this image, it looks like there's like a cloud back here, and there's this ship right here. And so I kind of want to make that. I mean, that's not the Viking necessarily, but the setting is like stuff that is in the background, but it's not the main character or the main subject of what's going on. So this cloud back here and this boat, that's what I'm going to make. So to do this, I'm going to use the brush tool. So we're going to talk about the brush tool now. But first, to make the next layer, I have to go over here to where the layers are, and I have to add a new layer. So to add a new layer, you can right-click here, and you can go to, you can go down here to the bottom right here, and you'll see something that looks like a little transparency sheet. This right here. It looks like a piece of paper that has like a fold, like you're pulling a new paper off of a sheet. And this is supposed to be a transparency sheet. So you're basically picking up a new layer. You're getting a new transparency sheet, one of these pieces of paper that goes on the projector. It's one of these things. So you're going to take a transparency film and you're making a new one. All right, so when I do that, you're going to see it show up on the top of your stack here. Really, it's on top of wherever you currently had clicked, whatever you had selected of your layers. So something important for you to know is that you're going to draw on whatever you have selected here on your transparency sheets. If I click on background, if I draw a smiley face, it's going to be on that background. If I click on layer 1, then now I'm going to draw on this transparency sheet. And if you see something like this where it looks like a checkerboard, a white and gray checkerboard, that means that that is transparent, that it's see-through. It's telling you that that is a totally see-through layer. You see that I created that layer, but it doesn't look any different on my canvas because this is see-through. You don't see anything on it. Now the first thing that you do when you create a new layer is you want to name it. So to name it, you double click on the text that's already there. It says layer 1. I'm going to double click on that, and now I'm going to say, okay, layer 1 is going to be renamed. This is going to be setting layer, and it's going to be a boat and clouds. I'm going to even be specific about what it is. There we go. So it's a boat and clouds. So I'm not going to get super artsy with this. I'm going to show you the brush tool, and I'm going to make this very simple. I know a lot of you are working on not extremely great equipment, so I'm giving you the basics here. I am drawing this Viking, but it's not going to look exactly like this Viking, okay? If I spent a lot more time on this and did a time lapse, perhaps it would turn out like that, closer, but it's going to be very basic here. All right, so first thing I need to do is I need to choose a color. So if I go over here to my colors, I'm going to choose a white cloud. All right. Now, how does this brush tool work? If you right click, you're going to see that there's different options that we have. So let's talk about size first. Okay. Seems fairly self-explanatory. There's a thing that lets you choose how big your brush is, and it shows you how big that brush is with a big circle. All right, cool. The next thing is not so obvious, and it's hardness. And you'll notice that when I move this hardness to make it bigger or smaller, that it will change the size of my circle, but it's actually a little bit tricky. So let's see what the difference is. If I did a size of this big, and I have 100% hardness, when I click and draw with this, okay, there's my cloud. Man, my gradient looks so cool, and now look at this. All right, if I zoom in on this, oh, how do I zoom in, by the way? Well, if you hold down the Alt key on your keyboard, that is Alt, ALT, it's right next to your space bar. If you hold down the Alt key and use your mouse wheel, you can zoom in and out. Alternatively, if you hold down Control and space, you'll see a zoom in, and you can click to be able to zoom in. You can also do Alt and space to go out. So if you hold down the space bar, you have this hand tool, which is very useful for moving around a canvas. If you click and drag while you have the space bar pressed down, then you move around your canvas. If I hold down space and I press Control and I click, I can zoom in. I can also click and drag to be able to zoom in and out. So if I hold down Control and space, I can simply click and move my mouse left and right, and you can see that I can like zoom in or I can zoom out. So that's basically how you can zoom in and zoom out if you want to do some really detailed work. You want to see the pixels. You want to go in there and do some pixel art. You want to get real detailed. You can do that by holding down Control and the space bar and then clicking and moving left to right. So there's a few different ways to zoom. There's also a zoom tool over here, but that's very slow compared to what I just showed you. All right, so if we look at this, we can see that my brush is very, it cuts in and it looks kind of ugly, right? It's very like sharp. And that's what hardness is all about. If I right click and I go back to my hardness and I reduce this, now if I click and draw, okay, all right, that's more cloud-like. Yeah, that's way closer to what I wanted out of a cloud. So it really depends on what you want to do, right? It depends on how sharp you want your brush to be. All right, that said, I've got my cloud now. I also want to draw that boat edge here. So I'm going to right click. I'm going to make the hardness 100% because I want it to be really hard. You'll notice that there's these different brush types down here, different types of painting tools that I could potentially use. I'm just going to pick one of them here, try this out, and I'm going to pick a different foreground color. I want a brown, so I'm going to go over here to my reds, Kind of go in this direction over here. That's more like over here. Yeah, there we go. Pick a brown color. That's good. And then I'm just going to draw a line. There's my boat. That doesn't look so good. I'm gonna change my brush type. I'm just gonna use a regular brush. So here we go. If you want hotkeys, I'm all about hotkeys. On your keyboard, you can use the square bracket keys to be able to make it go bigger or smaller. And a lot of times, this is what professional artists use, just because it's really easy to be able to get the brush size you want. So I can make that my boat. There we go. All right. So not exactly perfect, but you get the idea. The idea is that you have a basic idea of how these layers are going to work. Now, if I were being real about this, I wouldn't want my cloud layer and my boat layer to be the same. I would want my cloud in the background, and then I would probably want my boat to be in front of everything else. So I'm actually going to press Control Z a few times and get rid of those lines. And you'll notice up here there's something called the history. Ooh, oh, all right, all right. So the history lets you go backwards or forwards in time. So I can kind of go back and see what I did. And if I can go back to a certain point in my history of when I was doing things. Now, once I go back to a certain point, if I add more stuff, my history will now be changed. So you can only go back and forth until you make a change to what you're doing. So I'm going to go back before I drew that boat, and I'm going to make a second setting layer. Instead of making this the boat layer, boat and cloud layer, I'm going to call this, now it's not a setting layer, now it's just clouds. There we go. I know it's my setting, but it's my clouds. And I'm going to make another layer. I'm going to go down here, and I'm going to make this layer called boat. And I'm going to put it in front of the cloud. And I'm going to show you why I did this. There's my boat right there. Now, interesting thing. We're going to use the move tool for this. So if I go to my move tool up here, I can see that I'm able to move things. If I select different layers, you can now see, if I select it over here on the right-hand side, you can see that I can move them around. It kind of draws this frame around each object. So if I click on clouds over here, I can now click this and move it wherever I want. And you'll notice, when I move it behind the boat, it actually stays behind the boat. Interesting. If I move it back here, okay, it's in front of the background, but it's behind the boat. And this is because of the way that layers work. It is literally like these are all transparency sheets. This is the bottom stack. And as I draw things, I can put them on top of other things in a specific order. You'll notice that layers also have this little eyeball here. If I click on that eyeball, it hides that particular layer. So this is a good way of showing only what you want to be shown, or showing only what you want, or maybe positioning objects where you want them. If I wanted my cloud to be in front of this boat, all I have to do is drag the boat underneath the clouds layer over here on the side. So now I can see that my clouds layer is on top. It's on top of the boat over here. So that means that my cloud's going to be over here on top of it. Ooh, okay. If I want it to be behind, I just have to click and drag that layer underneath it. And now, there it is. It's beneath the layer. There's also some hotkeys on how you can move this around. You can move these around typically, but an easy way to go is just to click and drag them. It's really easy. All right, so there we go. You'll notice also that you're able to resize objects after you use the move tool. This is if you have this button clicked right here where it says transform controls. You can click on this check mark, and if you have transform controls selected, then you're able to actually click and drag to make things bigger. As you can see here, I can stretch it. If you hold down shift while you resize something, it keeps their proportions so it doesn't stretch it out. Pretty useful to know how to do. So there we go. If I wanted to make my cloud bigger, if I want to rotate it, I can put my mouse just outside the corner of where that box is, and you'll see your cursor looks like this. Now if I click and I drag, oh, okay, I can spin this thing around. All right, I can change the way that it is oriented. Very cool. All right, so the move tool is very useful for that kind of thing. All right, so now we have our boat. We have our setting and we have our background. Let's check out what the next step is. So the next step is creating a base subject layer. And this is all, once again, just using the brush tool. I'm going to try to do this pretty quickly, so that way it all makes sense for you. But all I have to do is create a new layer. I'm going to make it behind the boat, but in front of the clouds. So if I go over here and I click on my clouds layer, I want it in front of that, so I'm going to click on the layer right there. And you'll see that wherever you currently have selected, when you add a layer, it puts it on top of that layer. So I'm going to make this the Viking base. And let's see how he looks here. He's got a hat on, he's got an axe, and he's got a belt, and he's got like a tunic thing. All right, so I'm going to do an incredible artistic representation of this. I'm going to start off by making the axe. So here we go. He's going to have an axe that sits out like this. Whoop. There we go. And then he's going to have a blade to the axe. So I'm going to change the color here. And we'll do something like this. There we go. And if I wanted it to be behind this, I could get really wild with this and make a layer called axe. And then I can make the blade to the axe. And I could get detailed with this, right? I don't have to be really simple with this, but I'm going to make it really simple for right now. So here's the axe. Boop, something like that. And one right here. Something like that. All right. Now, typically when you do this, you want to do something like this, where you have, not showing OBS there on the side. You want something like this, to where you can see, okay, this is what it looks like on my reference image. And I have my main image over here on the side, so I can be like, okay, this is actually like a pokey thing here on top, like that. And then if I wanted to be real about like trying to recreate this, I would do something like this. All right, there's all these different little details that I would have missed if I didn't do that. Once again, if you hold down the space bar and you click and you drag while you're on your canvas, you can move that canvas around. All right, so now I want to put the helmet down. So it's something like this. He's going to have something like this. He's got the main helmet, and he's going to have these things that come down. I'm going to change the size of my brush to make it smaller. And then I'm going to try to draw on this part. There we go. Something like that. And the same thing on this side. So once again, you get as detailed as you want. You spend some time on this and it'll come out looking better. I'm going to get really basic now because I want to just get through it quickly to give you a how-to. So we've got that. Let's just say I'm not the most artistic person and I don't, for whatever reason, like I'm in a class like this, but I actually don't care about how it looks. I just am doing it for a grade or something. Then I would just color this in all haphazardly and not really put in a whole lot of effort. Let's get some wild hair in there. Do it brighter in color. And I'm just going to make it all crazy looking here. Like this. There we go. And there's different brushes too. So if I go in here and look at different brushes, these are what these brushes are for. You can go in and do something that's like different looking, right? It's not all going to be, the same type of brush. This is how they achieve some really interesting effects in Photoshop, is with different brush effects and stuff. Once again, I want to just make this quick. So I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this. I'm just going to use basic brushes for this. So there we go. We've got his hair, something like this. Cool. And then we've got his body. So we want to put his body in there. And this is a base layer. So that means that basically we want to create like the beginnings of what he's going to look like. And then we'll move in from there and we're going to create more layers. Like if I wanted to put his head up here on top and I wanted to make a new layer, which is like the Viking body, something like that. Put this underneath the head that I just made. Now if I draw something, it won't draw on top of the thing that I made before, which is really useful. Like, okay, I made the head and the hair and I don't want to draw over the top of it. So I'm I'm going to make a new layer that has just the body here. Something like that. And maybe I want another layer that I'm going to add on, which is the Viking arm. And I'm going to put this underneath the body here. And I'm already making way more than 7 layers, but I'm showing you why it's a good idea to have lots of different layers, because it makes it real easy for me to be like, all right, I drew the arm here, or I drew the body, now I want an arm that sticks out, but I don't want it to go over the top of everything else. You know, see if I put it, oh, yeah, it's also behind the axe that I made. Very cool. All right. Then I want a hand, and I want the hand to actually go over the base here. So I'm going to put my cursor on Viking base, which is where the axe is. And I'm going to put a new layer on there, and I'm going to call this Viking arm, or Viking hand. And I'm going to put his hand with his fingers right here, on this spot right here. So I'm using Control and the mouse wheel, or I'm sorry, Control space and the mouse wheel to zoom in on this. There we go. And then I'm going to pick my colors, a little bit darker, and I'll draw his little hand on here. Boop. There we go. Something like that. Once again, I'm not trying to be super artistic here. If I spent more time on it, I definitely could, but it's just a matter of getting it on there. So there we go. Now you can see that if I make these visible or invisible, you can see what each layer has on it. But it's a good idea to label what they're called, because then when you make stuff, it'll be very quick for you to be like, oh, I like this, but I messed up on the hand, and you're like, okay, which layer is the hand on? So you want to be able to use the layer of your choice, and the best way to do that is to label them as you make them. It's not purely like an exercise in making you type. It's really for organization purposes. All right, so let's say I got that. I'm pretty happy with this. I need some horns on the head, so I'm going to go back to the Viking base. I'm going to add them on top, so I'll add a layer. I'll do Viking horns. There we go. And I'll draw some horns on there real quick. Something like this. Boop. There we go. There we go, like that. Cool. All right, so once I've done this, now it's time to do some detail work. So to do detail work, basically you'd create, let's say I wanted to do the face here. I can go on the Viking base here, and I'm going to create a new layer, and I'm going to call this Viking face. So for this, I'm going to zoom in on it, and I'm going to try to do my best to do the most exact face possible. There we go. All right, so in reality, you'd want to zoom in and you'd want to like do some detail work. Like you'd want to choose different colors. You'd want to go in, all right, I want his beard to look really good, so I'm going to go in here and choose some different colors. Make it darker here, and then you know, speckle his beard a little bit. There we go. He looks. Oh, now he's ferocious. What kind of Viking doesn't have a ferocious beard, right? There we go. Okay, he's looking very ferocious now. I thought that he was gonna be a nice guy, and then I saw his frazzly beard, and I determined that he is no longer possibly a nice guy. He's definitely gonna kill my family or something. Just kidding. He's gonna get an A in the class. That's what's gonna happen. He's one of those kind of Vikings. He's an academic Viking that's he's gonna pass the class in flying colors. All right, there we go. Other detail stuff, maybe I want him to have like a cool belt and I want him to have a sword. I'm going to spare you the detail because you're watching this and you want to just know how to do this. And you don't want to just watch me do this forever. So there you go. We've got that. I also want that cool headgear stuff that's going on here. He's got like a circle. Oh, let me go back. Let me choose my color. He's got to have black. And he's going to have a circle here and a circle there. And a circle here. And so on, right? You want to go in there and do a little bit of detail. Now, how much detail is all up to you. Once again, some of you like doing artwork, and that's kind of what this is about, is practicing that. And others of you are just, like I said, doing this because it's a grade, and you're not a 2D artist. Or maybe you're just frustrated because you have to do this with, like, not the best equipment, right? And I understand that. I'm trying to make sure everybody's equipped with the best things you can, but it's really going to depend on just circumstance, right? So there we go. Let's say I selected all this, I created this area and I want to fill all this in. Something you can do is you can use a selection tool. So the best selection tool for this type of job would be the magic wand tool, which is right up here. If you go to, if you go right here to object selection, you'll see something called magic wand. It's just the little thing that looks like a bean here. If you go to that bean in your tools and click and hold down the mouse, you can choose a magic wand. And when I do that, now I can click in an area. Ooh, okay, and it selects everything around that area. And if I wanted to, I could now paint. If I use my brush tool, I have these marching ants. Everything in those marching ants, if I click and I paint, now it's only going to paint that area. Ooh, very nice. You'll see that maybe sometimes it doesn't get everything. Like, as you can see, there's some sections here that are a little bit off, that don't have everything selected. You can expand or grow this selection. If you go up to where it says select and you go to modify, you can now change that selection that you've made. So if I wanted to expand this selection by a certain number of pixels, let's say 4 pixels, now it's going to expand that selection, so when I draw, it's going to go out farther than what I originally selected. Okay, all right. So there are ways to paint more precisely and more interestingly. Let's talk a little bit about color, by the way. There's one last thing that I wanted to show you how to do that will help you to create this besides the text tool, and that is something called the dodge and burn tools. So let's take a look at those. If we go back to what's going on here, we're going to create a lighting layer with the dodge and burn tool. So let's take a look at what that looks like. With this thing that we have here, I can dodge and burn everything underneath these layers. So if I have my Viking face selected here, let's say I wanted to add some like interesting lighting detail to this face. What I can do is I can use the tool over here that looks like a circle with it looks kind of like a lollipop, I guess. If I click on this, this is the dodge and burn tool. So if I click on dodge, I can lighten things. If I click and drag, you'll see it makes things lighter than it was. And if I click on the burn tool, it will make things darker than they were. So very interesting. If I go in here, let's say this beard right here, if I want to make some areas darker, I can just click and drag, and you can see, oh, okay, it adds variation to the color here. So that's my burn tool. If I use dodge, it does the opposite. It makes things lighter. So now I've got, I've got all these different color variations of what's going on here. If I wanted to go back to my Viking base, I can see where my helmet is here. If I make my brush bigger and I go dodge, okay, it makes kind of a light. It gives him this illusion of depth now. I can see, I drew this light stroke around it. And if I go the other way and use my burn tool, I can do that over here on the other side and give it shadow. All right, we're getting like real fancy now. Look at that. That brush is kind of sloppy there, so I'm going to make my hardness less so that way it blends together better. But there we go. Look at that. Already got some shading in there. That looks pretty nice. If I go back over here to the Viking horns, I want to do the same thing. I'm going to put some shadow on the bottom to make it appear as though the light is coming from above this character. Pretty cool. If I go back over here and go to my dodge tool, I can make it brighter up here on top. I also want to turn my hardness down here. So there we go. Pretty cool there. A little bit higher light up there. Yeah. All right. So now my Viking looks like more like he has depth and he has like a 3D value to him rather than just looking like a kindergartner's painting. A little bit more digital tools. And once again, the more time you spend on this, the better it'll look. If I go to the arm here, I'm going to dodge the top of the arm because then it gives it this shading. There we go. And I'm going to burn the bottom of his arm so it gives him a little shadow. There we go. So that's lighting. That's some really basic lighting. There's other lighting that you could do, but I just wanted to give you the basics. If I go to my hand, make the bottom dark with burning. If I go to the dodge tool, I can use the dodge tool to lighten the top. And there we go. And now I've got this cool different look to it. Go to the body, same deal. I'm going to make the top lighter, and I'm going to burn the bottom a little bit to give him some shadow like it's behind this this boat there. There we go, something like that. So that's the basics. That's the basics of what you need to do. Let me go to my axe here, the base here, and just do a little bit of stuff on the axe. I'm gonna make the edges of the axe brighter with the dodge tool. Something like that. Bing, bing. And a little bit on top. That's good. And I'll burn the bottom of it a little bit. That's pretty good right there. Yeah. All right. And maybe I'll darken the middle a little bit. That's cool. All right. So it's up to you how you do this. I'm just showing you the tools that you could potentially use. Let's say I want to do the same thing with the boat. I want to have it darker here towards the bottom. I can just do that kind of deal. And now I see that I've got just different detail. I can also do this with my cloud. Why not? Make the bottom of the cloud a little bit darker. There we go. It's nice. Yeah. Give it a little bit of depth. I like how that looks. Yeah. All right. So there we go. I got my Viking. It's not exactly like this guy is, but like I said, as far as you getting really close, I just want to see that you put some effort into these tools, because the tools are really what matter. And depending on how much time you spend on it, you can make it look really good. All right, last thing you're going to do is you're going to use the text layer to create a text on top of all your other layers. So I'm going to go over here to where the text tool is, click on that T, and then I'm going to, up here on the top, let me move this, make it bigger here. Up here on the top, you're going to see these options. So you can click on this to choose what font you want to use. Up towards the top where this T is, the top bar here is always going to be, whenever you choose a tool, it's going to give you options for that tool. So every tool is going to have different options up here on top. Like for example, our move tool, all the options for it, like transforming the controls, are all right here. And the text tool, it lets you choose what your font is going to be. Very useful because there's a little preview here. So it lets you pick whatever kind of thing you want here. Let me see if I can find something that looks kind of cool. I kind of like this one right here. Oh, no, the Eater font. That's cool. All right, so I click that. And then once I do that, I can click in my... it's going to load the font. And then I can click, and it will let me put writing down in whatever color I have selected here. So I want to pick like a light color, white probably. No, actually, I want a purple font because this is a Viking. So we'll do some school colors here. Now, if I wanted to... make the size bigger, I could click right here and I could change the size of the font. Alternatively, after I type out what I'm doing, like if I put JHS Vikings territory, there we go. I have that here. If I wanted to, I could go back to my move tool, and if I have that transform controls, a check mark clicked, I'm able to now resize this. So I can make it bigger. I can rotate it if I want to, something like that. So I kind of like this. It's interesting. And there's one more thing that's really useful for text in particular, and that is using a stroke on your text. When I say a stroke, I don't mean like, you know, you got COVID, so then your heart broke apart into pieces and then you had a stroke. I'm saying that if you go up here to layer and you go to layer style, you can add what is called a stroke. And a stroke is actually just like a line that goes along the outside of the layer that you have selected. So in this case, if I have a text layer selected and I choose stroke, you can see, oh, okay, it's going to put a line around the outside of my layer in whatever color I want and however big I want that stroke to be. So up here you can see this box pops up where I can choose how big I want it to be. I want it to be like that. That's kind of cool. And I can change what kind of color it is. So I'm going to make it like a purple color. There you go. That's pretty cool there. All right. I like that. And actually, with your layer style, there's a bunch of things in here that you can add. Like if I wanted a drop shadow, I could click that, and now it pops off. Like it makes the text look like it's popping off of the layer behind it. And also, I could put like a color overlay on top of it, which will change what the inside looks like. If I click on that color overlay, I can change what the color looks like. So maybe I want it to be gold, like our Viking stuff usually is. There we go. That's pretty good. And press OK. And there you go. I've got this cool text that goes over the top of it. You can check out some of these other things. There's some other types of effects that you can add to layers, and we'll talk about this more later. I really just wanted to show you brush effects and stuff, but here's some stuff that, in case you're interested in making really cool art, this lesson can allow you to do that pretty quickly. All right, so after we're all done with that, the last step is for us to actually save it. Let's take a look at what that looks like here. So we created our text label layer. Now we're going to save this as a JPEG and a PSD, and we're going to actually turn it in. So let's check out what that looks like. To save in Photopea, you go up here to File, you go to Export As, and you can export this as these different things. There's a whole bunch of different file types that you can export it as. The ones that we are going to want, we're going to want a PSD. So you want to click on Save as PSD. PSD is a Photoshop document. And the reason why we save as a Photoshop document is that it saves all of these layers. So that way if we wanted to keep on working on this, if we wanted to keep on adding to it, we would have all these layers saved so we could go in and be like, oh, you know, I like that face kind of, but I want to do something else. Or maybe I wanted to add more to it or whatever. The PSD will allow you to save those layers. And look, in this case, I forgot to finish this. So I'm going to press the brush, use my default brush. I'm going to go over here and just fix this and finish it real quick. So that's why you want to use a PSD, a Photoshop document, because even if you're not using Photoshop, if you're using this type of application, you can still save your layers. So it's really worth it. It's good to save that file in case you want to keep on doing stuff with it. But we're going to save another copy. You're going to see that when I clicked on that save, it actually downloads it into your downloads folder. So that's where it saves it to. Good to know. After you do that, you go over here to File. You want to go to Export As, and we want to make it into a JPEG. And a JPEG, JPG, is basically like most pictures that you see on the internet is going to be a JPEG. And they are rasterized files, which means that they use pixels, but they also save all these layers, just get flattened down into one layer. So you can't go and move around the text later, or move their facial hair, or add or change stuff that's on layer per layer basis. It all gets flattened down to just one picture. So you can still draw on top of it, but you don't have nearly the same kind of editing processes that you would if you saved it as a PSD. All right, so I'm going to click on Save. I made it the maximum quality possible because I want to save it, everything that I do in the maximum quality possible. And then if I have to send it over the web or something like that, then maybe I'll make it less quality. But when I make saves of things, I want it to be the best quality I can because it can only go downhill from there. You'll see that also saves down into your downloads folder. So you're going to take this PSD file and the JPEG file, and you're going to submit it to Schoology into the assignment for full credit. I hope you enjoyed this lesson. I hope you create some great artwork. I can't wait to see what you come up with in the near future. We're going to share these out next week on Wednesday. So enjoy the process of creation, and I hope that this inspires you to create something really cool. Until next